In a review of government records, another case, also labeled as unidentified, was found. This one took place in Pittsburg, Kansas. The case is a single witness and has gone nearly unreported for more than 60 years. William Squires was on his way to work along Highway 160 about 8 miles from Pittsburgh when he sighted an unknown object hovering over a field. It was about 27 feet in length and about 12 feet high. Squires thought it had the appearance of an airfoil. He said that he saw small propellers around the perimeter. They were about a foot in diameter. There were also a number of windows in the craft, and through one of them Squires could see a man who seemed to be controlling the object. He was facing forward to the edge of the object. The windows were described as blue, becoming darker as time passed. This seems to be the type of sighting the Air Force would dismiss as psychological, which would be a nice way of saying that it was a hoax and there was something wrong with the witness. However, there was some physical evidence left behind, according to the government file. The object reported as hovering over an open field used for cattle grazing. General area under the exact location was pressed down and formed a round 60-foot diameter impression with the grass in a recognizable concentric pattern. Loose grass lay on top of the impression as if drawn in by suction when the object ascended vertically at a high speed. Vegetation and grass approximately 3 to 4 inches high. Area was extremely dry at present. Grass showed where Squires had walked into a fence and stopped. L.V. Baxter and D. Widner, local employees of KOMA, went to the place of the sighting 11:35 CST with Squires and confirmed his path to the fence and the 60-foot diameter impression in the tall grass. Robert E. Greens visited the site at 1600 on the 25th of August of 1952. With source and reports that the vegetation was laid down in concentric circles, but with the impression less distinct than reported by Widener and Baxter. Green obtained grass and soil samples of the immediate area where the impression was made, and also gathered control samples 200 yards removed from the site. He is sending some to the Air Technical Intelligence Center, Airmail Special Delivery. What is strange about this case is the fact that there seemed to be little interest in the pilot of the craft. Although there is another point where he was discussed, there's no real addition to the information. Clearly, based on these descriptions, that alien was human, or human enough to be indistinguishable from a human. Squires did suggest that the occupant seemed to be frenzied in his activities inside the craft. Although this case is essentially single witness, there was the physical evidence left by the craft. Others, Baxter, Widener, and Green, did see the impressions in the ground left by the craft. Eventually, this sort of evidence would become known as a saucer next, meaning simply that the crushed vegetation left by a UFO on the ground had somewhat similar features to other parts of the country and other parts of the world. The ultimate description would be of a crop circle. Here, rather than an elaborate design, it was a simple circle of crushed or flattened grass. The soil samples taken by Green were analyzed by the Air Force. In a short report of a single paragraph, the technician said they had found no radiation, burning, or stress of any kind. In other words, there was nothing to the sample to distinguish those taken from the landing area or from those taken 200 yards away. There is one final aspect to the case that is mildly interesting. In a couple of the letters from the government files, there is a notation that reminds all of paragraph 7, which is a paragraph in the regulations that requires unidentified cases be classified. Those who have information about the case are not allowed to discuss it with those who do not have the proper clearances. J. Allen Hynek, writing in the Hynek UFO report, provides a glimpse into the thinking at Blue Book at the time of this sighting. He wrote, "My skepticism was so great at that time that I was quite willing to dismiss it as a hallucination." Even with that admitted bias against the case, which never received wide exposure, is another which the witness said that he had seen the pilot of an unidentified craft and that was left as unidentified by the Air Force. In their zeal to label cases, this seems to be another that they missed. They could have easily labeled it as psychological, if not for the darned landing traces. Keeping with their tradition of labeling cases but not solving them, the Air Force officers decided that witnesses had psychological problems if they claimed to have seen the beings outside of their craft. There is no need to investigate if the witness is unreliable or under the influence of some kind of mental problem. In the Pittsburg, Kansas case, there is the same problem. Here was a case in which the object interacted with the environment. True, it was a single witness, but it left marks on the ground. Rather than send in someone to review it carefully, the Air Force allowed samples to be gathered by a civilian. They may have provided some guidance, but it would seem that an expert with the proper training should have been sent if the Air Force was serious about investigating UFOs. There is another aspect to this case, and that is that a military officer did gather some of the data. Green was apparently a second lieutenant in the Army Reserve. He is the man who collected the samples. But this is not to suggest that his military training had covered that. But his membership in the reserve caused one problem. The report he filed with his chain of command made its way eventually to the Air Force, but they delayed it.